We've got Sanjay Kapoor, Satyendra Gupta, Mr. R Chandrashekhar, Rajan Mathews, Rahul Patwardhan, of course, Keshav Murugesh, and I must take the opportunity to congratulate you, Keshav, for being elected the chairman of the NASSCOM BPM Council for a second time in a row. So congratulations are due there, and they come your way. I'm actually going to begin with you then, and ask you about this whole Digital India initiative. You've heard about the government, you've heard about the kind of services that are going to come the government's way. The question really is, at this point really is, are you, as a private sector player, if you were to park your top dollar there, are you today encouraged enough to do this? Because in the past we've seen, private sector participation has been very muted as far as Indian IT government initiatives are concerned.
So first of all, let me say that, just hearing all those speakers and of course the Prime Minister, the palpable, excitement was so huge. Clearly, people are seeing this as a huge opportunity, and finally an opportunity for us to give back to the nation. Look, we from the IT and the BPM world have transformed companies and countries through our solutions, and this finally gives us an opportunity to give back in a big way. I think there are certain steps to be taken in terms of execution of the Digital India initiative, and I know that the government and the IT ministry will work closely with organizations like NASSCOM to plan better, particularly around procurement, around payments, around cyber security, things like that. And as all of that gets announced and executed, I see no reason why private sectors do not participate wholeheartedly in this initiative.
That's a fair point indeed. You create an enabling environment around it, and there is no reason why private sector is not going to park in their top dollar. Rahul, but once the question comes your way, is Digital India and whatever we've heard so far in the last 2 hours, 10 minutes really, is it a lucrative initiative for you to look at partnering with the government at this stage, the various pillars that have been spoken about, the various products as far as the digital drive is concerned?
The reality is that all these projects are going to have to be executed through public partnerships, public-private partnerships in every area. For us in particular, NIIT, since we represent the skilling and talent development domain, we see three main areas that we can contribute. The first being the digital literacy. For Digital India, you need digital Indians. Every single Indian needs to be digital literate to be able to benefit from the infrastructure and the services that are going to be rolled out. And we've trained 35 million people, and we intend to contribute in a significant way in this area. The second, because of the digital infrastructure that's being rolled out, the enabling infrastructure for mass skilling across all industry sectors to support Skill India and thereby Make in India is going to be made available. And there again, because of our focus on technology-delivered skilling, we intend to make a significant contribution to supporting Skill India initiatives using the foundation of Digital India.
Fair point. Just hold your thoughts there, because I will get in Rajan Mathews as well at this point in time. Mr. Mathews, when do you think the takeoff point will really happen? The tip-off point, so to say, for Digital India? The optic fiber network projects in the 6 years now, and poor broadband connectivity is a huge challenge, and that still exists. So that's a pressure point, that's the pain point I'm talking to you about. But Mr. Mathews, let me still pick your brains on that.
The important issue that is going to happen is going to be customer experience. If the customer doesn't have a good experience in terms of the speeds that they enjoy, the quality of the application that they're running, the ubiquitous nature of that experience, having to be able to enjoy it wherever they want to enjoy it in terms of anywhere, anytime, I think those are going to be the critical components of takeoff. That critically means that networks are the key cornerstone of that experience, and so the operators are going to play a significant part in ensuring that the Honorable Prime Minister's vision takes off. And that's why we've been constantly saying, even with regard to the pricing, the regulatory environment, the policies, that this is an industry that needs to be nurtured. The financial health of the industry needs to be looked at and carefully managed so that these types of experiences become a reality.
Fair point indeed. So it's going to be a very experience-driven initiative. Sanjay, you spoke about that when we were talking just before the Prime Minister began speaking, and you said the two pillars will have to be execution and, of course, policy that should enhance the customer experience in this. The question that I'm going to ask you is the pressure point, the snags that exist in the system as far as Make in India is concerned. Is there enough spectrum? What about the optic fiber network? Is there enough of that available? I mean, could those be the binding constraints on an initiative like this taken off? It's very well intended, no doubt, but just to talk about the execution, and execution will rest on issues like this.
Yeah, absolutely pertinent point. There will be gaps like any large program. But before I really address your two gaps, I think it is very important to clarify from my perspective that for me, this is not about giving back to the society. It is a commercial activity that must have commercial gains for all stakeholders, because a nation which is poor on physical infrastructure has no choice but to take a path of digital way forward and building a digital infrastructure in the country. And I think we are rightly doing the right things. With the advent of digital India, I truly see three very unique phenomena hitting the country. First and foremost, one person takes away the entire gains is not going to happen in such a large schematic that has been drawn. I think there'll be multiple winners and multiple people who will garner huge amount of returns in this whole journey, and that's how things should happen. Second, very categorically, you will see very innovative partnerships emerging by way of policy or non-policy. You will see competitors in bed together. You will see guys who you've never thought of allying with earlier, you will ally with them. So new concoctions of partnerships will emerge because of this, because it is such a large field that we are trying to cover. And finally, very importantly, I think India for the first time now has an opportunity, like the United States of America, which is the mecca for entrepreneurship, to actually nurture entrepreneurship here. Now coming back to the 2 points that you said, do we have an infrastructure both on backhaul and on spectrum that is today going to be an enabler for a great customer experience? Today's answer is no. But can we make it happen? Yes, if we have scarcity of, say, bandwidth. Will India develop its own story around applications that will work on compressed bandwidth, that will work on probably a lesser quality and more quantity? I'm sure these innovations will come up on the table, and local concoctions and solutions will come out, which will be very unique to our part of the world. But yes, laying down fiber and having infrastructure up and about in the long run is absolutely fundamental to the success of this. And that has got no escape. We'll have to invest a large amount of money, but I saw so many industrialists today committing large amounts of money. I think for data to happen, for Digital India to happen, that investment into hundreds of megs of spectrum and large amounts of bandwidth to be provided through fiber, connecting buildings, homes, states, cities, is absolutely paramount for its success. Are we there? No. But can we get there? I think we can. Until such time that we don't have enough resources and the time is there for rolling out all these things, the gestation period is required, I think good policy can make it happen. A policy which enables more sharing, a policy which enables more collaborations can make and bridge the divide or the gap in the interim to make us and take us there.
I have a very important point to discuss, and that's of course the import being zero. Keshav, I'm going to ask you, I mean, you're somebody who travels the world over, just like the rest of our panel does here. The whole idea of imports being zero by 2020, isn't that a misplaced priority? All right, we should make in India and we should definitely export from India, but isn't that a misplaced priority of sorts, that everything should be made here, we should not import any electronic item? Sometimes the USP of using a gadget really is that this wasn't really made in India.
That will be maybe an ancillary impact of the bigger message that the government is really trying to drive in terms of Digital India, enabling every citizen, ensuring that companies and organizations that deliver these solutions become even more powerful, are able to deal with matters inside the nation, export as well, and as a result of which are able to afford for the nation whatever needs to be imported. Look, I want to just mention one very important aspect, taking off from where Sanjay left it. But a lot of this discussion that has happened as of this morning or this afternoon has been around you know, the smartphones, and let's face it, 25% of Indians really own a smartphone. There is still 900 million people who need to be enabled through smartphones and who are hankering for goods, services, and technology solutions. And really, those are the people that this government is trying to, you know, address through this huge, big revolution. I actually think it is as big an impact as the former Green Revolution, but in a completely different area. So huge potential, not just for the nation, but for everyone involved in this initiative.
I'm tempted to go to Rahul, but, you know, I'll have to come to Sanjay because you're a stakeholder in this. The whole manufacturing in India bit is very welcome, but isn't it a sort of a misplaced priority to talk about net zero imports when India can actually import some part of electronics right here? Sanjay?
So, yes, you are partially right, I would say. I think when somebody says that I want zero imports, I think it is basically setting a direction. I don't know whether it is literally meant and there's a timeline fixed to it. Can it happen in the next 2-3 years? Maybe very tough. Can it happen in the next 10 years? Maybe possible. But it has many challenges. First of all, India's competitiveness. How competitive are we in each one of these fields versus the direct competitors? Say China for mobile phones. You know, do we match up with them line by line item on cost, line by line item on policy, and therefore can we compete with them in the long run? I think that's paramount. And second, do we have the ecosystem moving along with the migration on manufacturing into the country? Because you generally tend to start with low-end value-added activities and then go up the value chain. So I think that will be time-consuming, but it is a good direction and a goal to have to say, let's aim for 100%. I'm sure if we were to reach 90%, you know, in 5 years' time or 7 years' time, everybody will still celebrate.
Fair point indeed. We will all still celebrate. Rahul, but Patwardhan, the question really comes your way. The Prime Minister and the initiative talks about things like digital locker, things like accessing important documents all online, keeping it all there. You do not really need hard copies. A self-assessment is good enough. Are Indian systems secure enough for that? Because this is really important data that you're going to be dealing with. A digital locker is very welcome. It's going to solve all our lives. But isn't security an issue there to deal with? Rahul?
Yeah, all these projects are ultimately going to be executed by the best-in-class consortiums of companies from India and around the world, which will therefore bring the best of technology. And I'm sure that the selection process for how these consortiums and their offers are reviewed is going to be very stringent. I look back at a participation that I had in a very similar event in Malaysia in 1996 when the Multimedia Super Corridor was launched, and before that the Golden Bridges project in China. These are very similar to that, but the scale and the size and the impact that these projects will have to have and will have on India is immense. I'm very confident that with the IT industry hub being in India, with the kind of technical capability being there in India, the selection that will go behind the final solutions that are going to be delivered on each of these platforms will be of very high quality, and we shouldn't be concerned about these matters. We'll have to be concerned as much as they would be anywhere else in the world.
That's a balanced assessment, but Keshav Murugesh, I have a similar question for you. You know, the government is talking about a cashless economy, e-wallets, of course, the whole digital locker that I just spoke about. You know, data security is really a big point of debate. It's a big point of concern around the world, and India is no exception. Are our systems robust enough to go ahead and, you know, experiment with something like that? Rahul, for one, believes this is going to be done by best-in-the-class operators, and so there is no issue to lose sleep over. Are you as optimistic?
I am very optimistic, because I must tell you, you know, I represent the business process management industry that delivers close to $26 billion of revenue to India. And I can assure you, well, you all think that we are in the business process business. We actually are in the reputation business. So what we do is really, you know, hold huge amounts of confidential data relating to our clients globally. And therefore, the back-end investments that we make in terms of, you know, data security, cyber security, things like that are huge. So that is an area I'm extremely confident that the Make in India model is what should be pursued, because I think we already have extremely good thinking, know-how there, and whatever else we need to get to build even more scale, we can get easily here.
Fair point indeed. Mr. Chandrasekhar, I have a question to ask of you. What are the metrics that you would put to use to assess the success of Digital India? It's all very well said. There was a huge paraphernalia with which it was launched. But what is going to be your own personal metrics to assess the success of a scheme like this?
The obvious metric, of course, would be in terms of internet penetration and the number of users who are using the internet. That is one very clear metric. The second important metric is the percentage of services which are available on the net. That is, anything which can be digitized and made available digitally is in fact being made available digitally. So if you look at large segments and then create those benchmarks for different kinds of services, that would be in fact also a very good indicator of how much of digitalization has happened. And this actually needs to be done sector by sector rather than across the economy as a whole. So if you look at different sectors like agriculture, like healthcare, like education, like financial services, these are measures which will need to be developed, taking the cue from benchmarks which have been developed in other countries. But I do believe that we will have to tweak these somewhat in the context of India. If you take the example of financial inclusion, one could have a metric of what percentage of transactions are being done electronically, but that may end up measuring what percentage of transactions are done using credit cards or using the internet. But in a country like India, in the long term, it's possible to conceive of a situation where most of these transactions are actually being done using the mobile, and therefore the metrics will have to very clearly be customized to this reality.
Very little time left, and which is why, Mr. Mathews, I'm going to ask you, we've discussed various things, but what we haven't discussed is the role that, vernacular content or local content and content delivery will really play in the success of a scheme like this. I want you to come in on that.
I think it's going to be very, very critical. One of the things that we've seen in our present voice environment is because it's voice, vernacular doesn't matter. But increasingly, as this move of demand to data happens, presently over 80% of the content of the internet, which invariably is the sort of killer app that people look for, is all in English. And so I think the vernacular is going to be an area for potential investment. Speech to text, text to speech type applications, those will see some benefit as a result. But clearly vernacular is going to be of importance, as especially we move towards the bottom of the pyramid, as we say, into the rural areas and into those parts of the country where vernacular becomes more and more important. Just to give you a statistic, if you look at our SMS application, there's only about 35% of the total users which actually use SMS because of the vernacular issue. So as we go towards digital applications, we're going to have to look more for vernacular as a medium of delivery of those services.
Fair point indeed. Sanjay Kapoor, I have time for just one last question. I'm going to throw this your way. IT industry has so far kept away from domestic government business, and I'm going to go back to a point that we've discussed and debated. This requires a lot of stakeholders to come together, including the global likes of Facebook and Twitter. What is it that the government needs to do to bridge the trust deficit? It's a great slogan, Digital India, but it is going to require a certain ease of doing business. It is going to require the government to move a certain distance to attract the investments. What should the government do, very crisply?
So I think very categorically here, it is neither IT, it is neither telecom, it is neither applications, it is neither storage alone. It is a mix of all these. So I think a consortium of these different verticals are going to come together. And I think this is where Prime Minister very categorically said minimum government and a maximum governance. I think if we can keep it at that, where there's least amount of interference and the governance takes care, I think this is bound to be a success. despite of the complexity that it carries with itself.
All right, complexity, but eventually aimed at making our lives simpler. Keshav Murugesh, Sanjay Kapoor, Rahul Patwardhan, Mr. R Chandrashekhar and Rajan Mathews, thanks very, very much for being with us on this special coverage. We're calling the digital drive. This is the big digital push that the Modi government is indeed making.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.